Welcome to the Dan Casper Show podcast, your chance to catch the full show anytime, anywhere. If you missed it live on the radio, no worries. We've got you covered with all the sports talk, opinions, interviews, and conversations from the show. From the Packers to the Brewers to the biggest stories in sports and around Wisconsin, it's all right here. This is the Dan Casper Show podcast. All right, second hour, kick it off right now on this Wednesday morning, making the turn Wednesday. Thanks for hanging out with us and making us, if you're already up and at it and tuning in and already chiming in and sending in your analysis, your commentary, your thoughts, your opinions, we appreciate it. Coming up this hour, I want to get to a little Bucks chat here in just a skosh, so we'll get to that in about an hour or so. We'll get sidetracked by C-Bob's toy pick there. We're going to talk with Ty from Slab Factory for Inside the Hobby. So, also, we'll do a little Hy-Vee game changer. Looking for your picks, all right? Looking for your picks. What do you think is the Hy-Vee game changer of the week? Whether it's a player, a play, a move, or something. What do you think is the Hy-Vee game changer of the week? Plus, give me your Mike Star markets. Am I wrong? Am I wrong for saying this? Am I wrong for thinking that? What's your sports opinion where you would say, am I wrong? So, what else do we got? We're going to get back to some more Brewers talk as the Brewers, just a few hours from now, 12:35, first pitch going up against the Boston Red Sox in the rubber match. We get Shane Drowan making his Major League debut going up against a team that had him last year. So, kind of a little bit of excitement. Sonny Gray is going to go on the other side. Brewers very familiar with him. So we'll get back to some more Brew Crew chat throughout the rest of the morning here too. So, but yesterday, before the Bucks game, the Bucks did fall to the Brooklyn Nets. They're going to be back at it tonight, taking on the Detroit Pistons. Doc Rivers was asked, about his future. How much longer he wants to coach in the league. And I think if you poll the majority of Bucks fans, they're hoping that the now newly minted Hall of Famer isn't back on the sidelines for the Bucks next year. And it sure sounds like Bucks fans, you got to get your wish. Because he said, I won't answer that, but he did. I won't answer that, but I have grandkids that I want to see. I'll put it that way. And so I'll let you figure it out from there. I have 7 grandkids now, and they're all 8 years and under. And it kills me every time I miss Grandparents' Day with each one of them in school. It's probably time to go see them more. I'll let you figure out the rest. All right, so he ain't back next year. We know that. He said it without saying it. He ain't back next year. So for Bucks fans who want to see changes or want to see, stuff get scrubbed down and just kind of rebuild everything, and it starts with the coach, there you go. He ain't coming back unless there's a change of heart and the Bucks really want him to come back. But, I mean, if you're a Bucks fan, at least maybe you got your checklist of things to do in this offseason. And with a new head coach, you're probably putting, check. Going to be there. Is it going to be Darvin Ham? Is it going to be somebody from outside the organization? Do they just need to start fresh, completely fresh? And with that, if they're going to have a new head coach, do you think the Bucks should have a new general manager calling the shots? You think that they should bring in a different voice, even though they really like John Horst? They gave him an extension. They essentially blocked him from interviewing with the Pistons last year or 2 years ago. Do they think, all right, we kind of have to move on from that? I will say this, Joe Mazzulla, who is the head coach of the Boston Celtics, and in one of Lori Nichols' great pieces, Giannis mentioned Joe Mazzulla and how they're doing this year, and they didn't have Jason Tatum and such. And he credited Mazzulla, and Mazzulla was asked about it yesterday. So, about Giannis's comments about him. And Mazzulla said, obviously he's a great player, but I think my reaction was like, you can't do anything unless you have the players to be able to do that. And I think that may sound, I say it a lot, but it's just that simple. I think the greatest gift you could have as a coach, especially in the NBA, is to have a group of players that have a high competitive character, care about winning, and want to get better. I think it starts there, and so that was kind of my response to that. And this, again, goes back to Giannis's comment when he told Lori Nickel, like you saw, I talked with Coach Joe Mazzulla. I said, you had so many opportunities to make excuses, but you didn't. And he said, oh, they're good players. I said, no, it's about the mentality that you installed in your place. Mazzulla went on, though, to say we had to kind of get to the knowns. Like, what do we know? We know that Jaylen Brown is going to lead. He's going to get better as a player. He's going to get better as a leader. He's going to be in position. He thrives in situations like this. Where the deck is stacked against you, you got that chip on your shoulder. JB thrives on that. We know that. We know here are all the players that we have for opening night, what they've done for us. Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser have won games for us. So we just know the knows. We knew Tatum was going to do everything he could to get back from a torn Achilles. We knew that. And so with all those knowns, it's like, okay, here's where we're at and how we go about this. I think it was just kind of getting on the same page with Jaylen, getting on the same page with the guys that were returning, getting on the same page with where Tatum was in his rehab and saying, okay, this is how we have to go about it. And it's a credit to them. I think sticking to that, and we got a long way to go, but here's where we're at. You look at that Celtics, and that's where I look at that team, because you look at the offseason that they had. Tatum was, he tore his Achilles towards the end of last season. They still had Jaylen Brown, but then they made a lot of changes, right? Drew Holiday, gone. Porzingis, gone. They moved a lot of pieces. And like many, I was one of them, and a lot of us thought, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a down year for the Celtics. You throw in the Pacers, going to be a down year for them. Is this an opportunity for teams like maybe the Bucks, the Knicks, to take advantage of that? And yet, here we are. Celtics kept winning games. A little off to a slow start to begin the year, but winning games. One of the top teams in the East for majority part of the season without Jason Tatum. And now Tatum's back, and would it surprise anybody if the Celtics win it all or even go to the NBA Finals this year? Heck no. And Mazzulla giving a lot of credit to Brad Stevens, front office, in finding the right players, finding the players to buy in. It's not always about it. I think, sometimes we as fans get so it's like, oh, it's just about talent, getting all this talent, adding all this talent. Talent. Load it up like it's Madden. Load it up like you're playing a video game and just get all the talent that you possibly can. That can win you some games, but that's not the be-all, tell-all. That's not where a lot of successful teams thrive on. It's not just who has the most amount of talented players on their team. To me, it's a team is, you need a little bit of talent. You probably need a couple of go-to guys and, your main players and such. But role players, guys who buy in, guys who fit, guys who have the mindset, that makeup. Putting together a team is more than just accumulating all of this great talent. And that's where the Celtics have done just a fantastic job. The Spurs were like that too back in the day. Yeah, they had Tim Duncan. You throw in Manu Ginobili, who might be one of the best six-mans of all time. Tony Parker. Bruce Bowen. You throw those guys in, smart moves. Sneaky moves. Moves that you look at it like, okay, that doesn't really move the needle. But, man, now you look back at it, it's like, dang, that was a really good move. Even like in the Bucks when they won it in 2021, bringing in a guy like P.J. Tucker. Trading for Drew Holiday, for crying out loud. Smart moves like that. And you just kind of look at some of the stuff that the Bucks did, and they tried. I know they were hampered with money and contracts and such, but did they put together the right pieces? Is it more on the coaching side? Is it more on the talent side? Is it more on the front office now building that team? There was a lot of inconsistency this year, and I just don't know if everybody had a chance to kind of grow together, whether it was injuries, whether it was weird rotations and lineups, or whether it was the right makeup of players. I believe it was all of the above. Not to cop out or anything. I feel like it's all of that. And it's nothing as simple as, hey, we just got to go out there and load up on all these guys. I mean, for crying out loud, look at, like the Houston Rockets, okay? Rockets were a surprise team last year, one of the top teams in the Western Conference. Then what did they do in the offseason? They acquired Kevin Durant. They're still going to make the playoffs, but are they a better team than what they were last year? It's kind of questionable. Heck, the Detroit Pistons of like the 2011, 2010? No, not even 2005, excuse me, like 2005. It was a boring team. One of the most boring NBA finals I remember watching was Pistons and Spurs. But it was a team. You had Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, Prince. But they were getting it done. They were a team. Really good players. But you could tell that was a team. And who'd they beat the 1 year? Was it the 04 NBA Finals? Who'd they beat? Lakers. Shaq, Kobe, and what'd they do? They added Karl Malone and Gary Payton. They won a ton of games, and they made the NBA Finals. But it was the Pistons that beat them. Mark says, Ice Bowl. I watched it on our family black and white TV at our house on the west side. It was also my 11th birthday, December 31st, 1967. Boy, Mark, with that and the Hank Aaron one, you're aging yourself, man. We've got Chadwick, a.k.a. C-Bomb, saying best toy I had. Jarts, actually lawn jarts. Nothing like giving kids weighted 4-inch needles to chuck way up in the air in the yard and try to land it in a hoop. How many kids had their heads impaled in the 80s? Jeez. What an awesome game they need to bring back. Good luck with that one, man. Good luck with that. All right. Let's take a quick break. But, hey, send me the sports moments that kind of live in your head, live in your mind. What's a sports history moment that you remember practically everything about that day still? We all have them. But what's a moment? Maybe it's from high school. Maybe it's college. Maybe it's from the pros. Whatever it may be. All right. Probably have a few of them. We'll take a quick break. Plenty more to get to coming up after these quick words. Baseball is back, and that means one thing. It's also brat season. So swing on into Mike's Star Market and stock up for game day the right way. From fresh and a wide variety of flavorful brats, they've got everything you need to fire up that grill and feed the whole crew. Whether you're tailgating or maybe doing some backyard grilling or just catching the game at home, nothing says baseball like brats on the grill. Make every pitch, every inning, and every bite count. That's Mike's Star Market on the west side in Eau Claire, your home for brat season. So let's talk a little football because it's kind of football-ish season, too, with the NFL draft just a couple of weeks away. First round will kick off 2 weeks from tomorrow as we get set for that. I don't know, but it feels like the draft's kind of quiet leading up to this. I don't know if it's because maybe it's a local thing, Packers-wise. We don't have a first round. Maybe not a lot of intrigue at the top of the draft or anything like that. Or maybe it's just because last year was Green Bay and it was all the excitement around here too. So maybe a little bit of a letdown. But starting to see more of the top 30 visits and all that. So that's getting me a little bit excited too. So
you know what else? First of all, brats.
Yeah.
Man. You were making my mouth water with that. I honestly was sitting there, I'm like, I could go for a brat right now.
Well, you were making my mouth water showing me victory scotches last night. So,
as I said, some days just getting through the day and getting a lot of stuff done, it's worth a victory scotch. Yep. So, yeah, scotch and brats.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need to do.
That's the Wisconsin victory combo.
It's a pretty good victory combo. But I'm kind of with you as far as the draft goes, but I think it's all of the above. Mm-hmm. I think last year, obviously, the hype around the fact that the draft was coming to Green Bay. This year, Green Bay with no number one pick. and little intrigue at the top of the draft. So yeah, I'm getting into it though.
Yep.
I've got my board and some guys that I like for Green Bay. So and I think this is a critical draft, and I also think for Green Bay, but I also think that I don't think Goody's done. And you and I have talked. I still think there might be a veteran or two that he goes after either right before the draft or right afterwards. So, but this is one of those drafts where you don't want to draft for need, but Green Bay has some needs. And you look at the cornerback position, you look at defensive line. I think offensive line is always going to be there. Also running back. Right now there's no backup running back to Josh Jacobs to speak of. Chris Brooks is there, but we know Chris Brooks is there really more as a third down back, pass blocker, that type of thing. So yeah, there's some needs on this football team. So I say, I think Green Bay is probably going to go the direction of best player available at a position.
And you mentioned running back, and we kind of talked about one yesterday, the kid from Arkansas.
Mike Washington Jr.
Yeah.
Love him. Love him. 6'1", 230, 4.340. Right now he's a guy, Packer 30 visit guy, and I love him. And right now I've got him going to Green Bay in the third round. I think he is the perfect complement to Josh Jacobs. And again, I love Josh Jacobs. I think he's a workhorse, and I think he carries the G, so to speak. But I think a lot of tread on the tires, and I think Emmanuel Wilson did a real nice job last year. But I think Green Bay, to be truly dynamic, I think they need that second back. So I'm a big Mike Washington fan, and when you look at film of him, he's a bigger Aaron Jones. He reminds me of a bigger Aaron Jones, the way he runs. He also seamlessly catches the ball, so brings a little bit of everything to the table. I don't know if he'll be there in round 3 at pick 84, but that's right now who I'm looking for Green Bay.
It's interesting. We've always talked about the top 30 visits, and Green Bay kind of does it differently than a lot of teams. It's not always the first round guys and such. And more so this year, it's kind of interesting to see who they are bringing in on their top 30. There's a mixture of guys that may be going undrafted or later on or mid-round and such. You mentioned one of those visits. Has there been any other names that have kind of popped up for you? I mean, it's been a really big mixed bag. Receivers, linebackers, defensive linemen. Yeah,
when you look at it, there's a couple of guys out there. First of all, they've got Charles Demings, cornerback from Stephen F. Austin, coming in. He's a kid I really like in a mid-round. But then you got a guy like Josh Geske from Illinois, who's probably looking at an undrafted or 6th or 7th round type of thing, offensive lineman from Illinois. So, yeah, they're all over the place. Texas Tech quarterback Berthan Morton. There's a kid that's coming in for a 30 visit. So, yeah, and, I think it's always hard to tell if Green Bay is looking at, okay, let's make sure we have our bases covered from the undrafted standpoint. The Senior Bowl for me is always, I think, more of the litmus test for Goody. It seems to me that guys who Green Bay shows interest in at the Senior Bowl tend to be on their draft board. So, that's looking back in it. I always look at, okay, who was at the Senior Bowl? Who did Green Bay speak with? Those types of things. And so, but yeah, they've always looked at these 30 visit types of things. It is a mixed bag. It is a mixed bag of guys who could be in that second round pick. Somebody like a Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker from Texas Tech. Somebody like that could be there, but also you say, okay, this might be an undrafted guy. We want to make sure we're covering our bases.
We had a question from Nick yesterday. He threw out there when we were talking a little green and gold, and I'll throw it to you too. What would be your reaction, let's say, if Green Bay drafts a receiver with the first, second round pick? To me, it almost says, does that give us an inclination about Christian Watson and Jane Reed's future?
Probably.
Contract-wise?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I also, at that point, would applaud Goody. If he really, truly sticks to his board. Look, you look at how Seattle and John Schneider has drafted. And through the years, they've drafted guys, at least through the years that since rebuilding after the Legion of Boom and all that kind of thing. that they put together a team, obviously, that won a Super Bowl. But also, you look at it and you say to yourself, they never really drafted for need. JSN, not a need pick for them at the time. And so I think Green Bay needs to lean into that John Schneider-esque a little bit. And I think Goody's done a good job. I think Goody is not drafted for need. But when you do reach, that's when you start having issues. And if you look at Ron Wolf and you look at Ted Thompson and you even look at Goody and you look at the reach picks, they tend to not work. So if Green Bay drafts a receiver in that second round and they truly feel that that was the best guy on our board, I have no issue with it. That also tells you a little bit about what they think of the future of Watson and or Reed.
I want to go back to, since we're on offense, Matt LaFleur in one of the comments that he had made from the owners meeting, and he said that, we're going to start like it's year one to kind of reignite this offense. When he says that, I'm sure some fans are like, "Oh my God, like what? Why are we doing what? Why are we got to start all over again?" and that sort of thing. But I mean, does it make sense from your perspective that Matt LaFleur is like, you know what? Maybe we just got to go back to the drawing board and just kind of reignite this thing from the beginning.
It made sense, but it seemed to me that he's reaching a little bit. Yes, it was coach speak a little bit. And, I think he's got some assistants on the offensive side of the ball that should really be on the hot seat, be under the microscope right now. Obviously, one, Luke Butkus, Adam Stenovich. There's some question marks on that coaching staff, on that offensive side. So when he said he was going to go back to square one with this offense, I'm all about self-scouting. Yep. I really am all about it. But that stood out to me as not an excuse, but almost he's reaching for answers. He's reaching for something right now, and he doesn't know what it is. So to say that we're going to go back to year one of this offense, I would have much preferred him saying, we're doing a lot of self-scouting and we've seen some tendencies that we need to correct. He talked about finishing a drill all the way through and really looking at it from each individual drill being very intentional. And, we talk about that at the high school level. We really do. So I get all this, but to me, it just says he's searching for answers. And he doesn't know why Green Bay slipped backwards last year offensively. And so, I'd rather have him say, look, we're doing a lot of self-scouting. We realized some things last year, or looking at the tape, we realized that maybe we had some tendencies that didn't help us. I would have preferred that language. And again, I'm not a Matt LaFleur basher, so I'm not here saying fire him.
Right.
It struck me as odd that we're going to go back to year one of this offense.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a poor choice of words or something like that.
I would have much rather him said, hey, we are doing everything we can to make sure that we're putting the offense in the best position possible. Now, could that mean going back to some grassroots things that he installed 6 years ago? Yeah, absolutely. I'm good with that. But to say that, we're going back to day one of the offense, like I said, I think he's reaching a little bit and trying to find some answers.
Right. Yeah, maybe it's incorporating with Sky Moore on there a little bit of that Tyler Swervin Irvin type of stuff.
Which is great. I have zero problem with that. And again, I in particular really like that signing, by the way. I think from a special teams and an offensive standpoint. But yeah, it just, I guess you're right. Poor choice of words might be it. But it seemed to me like he's searching for answers. And that's okay for a coach to do. But to say we're going to go back to day one of the offense makes zero sense to me. It didn't make a lot. Jordan Love's not at that point. He's progressed past day one of this offensive install. So you're hoping you say, hey, we're going to take it to the next level rather than go back to day one.
How excited should we be as Packers fans to see Micah Parsons really taking under his wing Colin Oliver and Barron Sorrell working out with those two guys?
The optics are great.
Yeah.
The optics are wonderful. You love to see that kind of thing. You love to see a locker, an on-field leader really showing his off-field leadership. And so you love it. Now, are we going to see Oliver and Sorrell becoming, the next Micah Parsons? Probably not. But yeah, you love to see it. So the optics are great. And, you know, I love seeing that kind of off-season work. When you got an older vet, especially a stud like Micah Parsons, bringing the young bucks in, yeah, that's great to see. I want to see it on the field.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I was excited for both of those guys last year. And both of those guys fit much more, I think, in Jonathan Gannon's defense than they did last year with Hafley's. And so, you know, they were undersized defensive ends in a 4-3. They're perfect outside backers in a 3-4. So I'm really excited for them. And the optics look great. I want to see it translate to the field.
And another one of those guys, I know you've mentioned it a couple times, but you going back to at the beginning where you said, you know, Goody still could add some veterans and such. Trayvon Diggs, obviously we know he's BFFs with Micah. Green Bay got a little bit of a taste of it last year.
Yeah.
Would you be open to that? I don't know if that'd be something maybe after the draft they kind of address.
100%. 100%. First of all, he's 28 years old. This isn't like you're picking up a 33-year-old cornerback. And Trayvon Diggs, not exactly the best technique player, but obviously when he was at his peak of his game, he was a game changer. He was absolutely a game changer. 100% I would go after him if you felt he was a fit. And I think that's one of the reasons Green Bay did it last year. Look, let's bring him into the locker room. Let's see what we got with this cat and then make a decision in the offseason. We all knew as Packer fans that they weren't going to keep him at that salary.
Right.
That was a no-brainer. We all knew that. But to have that audition last year, a couple of weeks on the team at the end of the year, I think was huge. And so I'd be 100% down with that. And again, of course, it comes down to money. If Packers spend stupid money on him, which they don't need to, then I'd say, well, wait a second, why are you doing that? But for the right deal and the right opportunity, and I'd make it potentially a couple of year deal. I wouldn't make it just a 1 year prove it deal. I might put, you know, a couple of years with some incentives on playing time and those types of things. And if he reaches those incentives, maybe that triggers something else for next year. So, yeah, 100%. I'd have zero problem with that pick.
Staying with corner to kind of wrap it up here, because I've seen some people, I kind of figured this was going to be happening, but one Jair Alexander has been active on social media, and I believe the Eagles still hold his rights because he retired and such, but I think he was in Green Bay a couple weeks ago. He posted up a picture and such, and everybody's like, oh, what does that mean? And he's posted up pictures of him with the Packers. I think there was even one when they were playing in, was it South America? And he made a comment about this is when MLF, Matt LaFleur, and I were like best buds.
Yes.
Sort of thing, which is like, okay. So it's got Packers fans saying, can we bring him back? Would you bring him back?
Part of me says that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
But a part of me says, look, it all comes down to money.
Yeah.
It all comes down to money, and I'm not working these guys out, so I don't know what his injury situation is like. But if you can bring him back on a team friendly deal and a prove it deal, why not? You know, why not again? And so, but also, you know, there is a time and a place where you say, okay, that ship sailed.
Yeah.
We're going to move on. And so, you know, does Green Bay need to? Are they going to make a move at cornerback with a veteran? I think so. Yes. I think you're going to see Goody go out and do something with that cornerback position from a veteran perspective. Do I see him doing something in the draft as well? Yes, probably doubling down at that position. And so, but is that the position group that I see Goody doing something with? Absolutely. So Jair at the right price, sure. Sure, why not? I'd rather have Trayvon Diggs. The one thing with Trayvon Diggs is you're not getting the injury problems. And I just think with Jair, he proved it. You know, Goody was right to do what they did and how they handled Jair. And so, you know, went to Baltimore, didn't work out. Went to the Eagles, didn't work out. Then he's retiring. And so I would personally, if you're saying to me you could have Diggs or Jair, I'd take Diggs.
You're probably going to get at least a guy who's going to be committed to playing, right?
Yeah, you're going to get a healthy player.
Yeah.
And again, the number one talent you can bring to the table is availability in a situation like that. So, yeah, I would, if you're going to spend a veteran minimum kind of a deal on somebody, I'd do it on Diggs before I'd do it on Jair.
So, last thing, because we're just 2 weeks away from the draft, if more fans are seeing these top 30 visits and such, what's something that, in your opinion, that fans should be kind of paying attention to with these top 30 visits? Is there a lot to it, a lot of noise? Because it is a little bit different without the first round pick.
It is. I think fans should look into it. If you're one of those people that likes to put together a mock, but a lot of these names you're not going to find in the second, third, and fourth round.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these names are going to be day 3 of the draft. And so, I think that's what you look at. And one of the guys who I love for Green Bay, I just don't know if he's going to be there in round 2, and he's a top 30, is Chris Johnson, the cornerback out of San Diego State. And so that's a guy that I would love if he falls to Green Bay. I don't see it unless Green Bay moves up at that point. So, I think the other thing real quick, Dan, that you look at is what kind of body types, especially defensively, are they looking at? Because it's going to tell you a little bit more about what Gannon wants.
Yeah.
So some of these top 30 visits, look at the body types. Now, Goody falls in love with the RAS.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
The relative athletic score. And so he falls in love with that. So look at guys also from that standpoint. He tends to lean, if player A and player B are identical production-wise, he's going to draft the more athletic player. And so I think you look at that as well. If you're trying to glean something out of these, I think that's where you go, is you say, okay, let's look at body type, let's look at position, and then let's look at that RAS, because it's going to tell you probably if the Packers are legitimately interested.
All right, it's a question we've had for the day because it was this day in 1974, Hank Aaron hit number 715. So I've been throwing out, we've had some really good stories. What's a sports history moment that lives in your mind? Like, we always talk about world history stuff, like, I remember where I was for this and that. Is there a sports one?
You know what? For me, it is the 1980 Olympic hockey team. And I'll tell you why. Weirdly enough, so my dad won custody of me in 1976. So he and I, it was just the two of us. He, for some reason, was adamant at the start of those Olympics. He said, JoJo was what he called me back in the day. He said, we're going to watch all of these hockey games. So I watched every one with my dad. Every one. And so, and it's funny, the first night, I think at the tie against Sweden, I think it was, the first night I wanted to watch the Bucks game instead. And, of course, we only had one TV in the house. And so he's like, nope, we're watching Olympic hockey. And I don't know why. My dad passed away in 2007. Don't know why he was so adamant about it, but we watched every one of those games. We watched them together, just the two of us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah, and I've got a scrapbook still to this day that I put together with pictures. My dad and I took a trip up to Camp Randall then, we're from Beloit, and saw the Wisconsin athletes being recognized, because Eric Heiden was also in that Olympics. And so, that was it. There's just no question for me. Having that with my dad was pretty awesome.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks
what was
for sharing
yours?
That. I'm trying to think. There's a few of them. I don't know why, but this one, like, I could tell you everything about the day. March 4th, 2008, when Favre retired.
Oh.
I don't know why, but it's just, maybe it's because one of my college roommates, one house, 5 guys, 1 bathroom. That was something.
Yeah, and you tend to remember those college days specifically. So, where you were your time of life, too.
But it was Joel just busts through my room. He's like, turn the TV on, and he walks off. So my morning started off that way. And I'm like, okay. So it was on there. I'm like, oh. I walked down the stairs, and my other roommate, Jake, we just look at each other, we hug.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic.
So it's stuff like that. And then I go to campus, UW-Eau Claire, wearing my Favre jersey. I remember a professor saying, Thursday we're going to watch the press conference. So that's what we're doing for class.
Very cool. So what class was it?
Kinesiology, biomechanics.
Okay.
Yeah. It was.
That's that, and Dan, that is a cool story of a slice of life and what sports means. And that's, again, the highs and the lows you have as a true sports fan.
Yep.
I wouldn't trade them for anything.
Yep.
I wouldn't trade them for anything. So good stuff.
And I remember we all grabbed a beer that night, and I did a toast to Brett Lorenzo Favre.
To number 4.
To number 4.
To number 4. Yeah. No, I there are those moments that hang with you, and it's cool to relive those. And For me, there's just no doubt. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, February 22nd was the actual date.
I think that is,
1980, when they beat the Russians. And, my dad was just bawling. We were hugging. It was awesome.
That's awesome. All right. Thanks, Joe.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it, man.
sir. Always good stuff.
Yeah. All right. We got to take a quick break, but we'll be right back after these few words.